All right. It is good to be back. I'm Barry Dee, and I'm back with another episode of All Politics Are Local, and thank you for tuning back in, all four of you. This show is about delivering the news, and this is news that is not covered by the regular media outlets, and there are plenty of stories out there that just aren't covered. The local papers used to cover the local municipal meetings, but not anymore. There's just not enough staff or time to dedicate to this type of news, and there are plenty of stories just at the township and borough level that the average person has no idea about. Without the media covering the local governments in check, that's what it was originally designed to do. Those municipalities, those government offices can do what they want because nobody will ever know, and that, my friends, is the crux of this show, bringing information to you, the listening public. So today's guest is Dolores Troiani, and Dolores is a Chester County attorney. She's been working on some very interesting issues involving mail-in ballots and voter service. Voter service is basically the fortress that protects your sanctity in voting. So there's a ton of information here. I was tipped off on this thing, and I wanted to reach out to her and see if she wanted to come on, and she gladly agreed. She may regret it at the end of the show, but we'll see how it's going to go. And I'm sure this is going to be an eye-opening conversation and interview. So, Dolores, why don't you tell me a little bit about yourself?
Well, I live in Chester County with my husband in Schuylkill Township. I grew up in Delaware County. I attended Cardinal O'Hara High School, Rosemont College, and Villanova Law School. I graduated from Villanova in 1975 and been a lawyer ever since, which is obviously a long, long time. I started here in Chester County as an assistant district attorney. Then I went with the strike force on organized crime and racketeering, which was part of the Department of Justice. I was stationed in Miami.
Which is funny with both of us being Italian.
Well, that was the issue. They wouldn't station me in Philadelphia because we all have minor mafiosos in our family. So I had to go to Miami, which was horrible. I hated it. I had to leave because the exterminators said they would kill me before they killed those flying roaches. So I came back and worked at the Philadelphia DA's office under Eddie Rendell. And was there for about 14 years and then went into private practice ever since. I'm now what I call semi-retired. I've closed my practice and just take a few of my treasured clients with me. And now I have more time to devote to being the solicitor for the Republican Party of Chester County, where I am a volunteer.
Wow. Okay. You know what? I'm going to adjust your mic a little bit. Give me 1 second here. We're going to...
Oops. Okay.
There we go. That's a little bit better for you. I know it's a little intimidating, but it'll be better for you.
Can make me cross-eyed.
So here we go. Tell me some of the cases you've done. You've been in this for, you said, 130 years.
That's
so
right.
Tell me some of the cases that you've been involved in.
Well, I was the prosecutor for the Johnstons, which is the mass murderers in the 70s. You can read Bruce Malday's book about that.
They stole farm equipment, killed people, including their own family, and made a movie about it, which you say
was horrible. Had no relationship whatsoever to anything that was done in that case.
You know, it wasn't even filmed in Chester County. They filmed it in Tennessee.
Right, they did. No.
That's reality for you. Okay, I interrupted you. Go ahead.
So I'm in that book. I'm in another book called Chasing Cosby because I represented Bill Cosby's first victim, the Canadian lady who came forward. She wasn't his first victim, but she was the first one who came forward. I did the civil case, not the criminal case, but we did assist the Montgomery County DA's office in the criminal prosecution. Mm-hmm. So I've had a very varied civil practice, but you never get over being a prosecutor. And I think you bring that type of mindset to all of the issues where you because I've had so many jury trials and tried so many other cases, prosecutors know how to present a case to a jury. They know what is evidence. They know what is not evidence. And their goal is, as a prosecutor, not for convictions, but to achieve justice. At least that was what it was when I was a prosecutor. I'm ashamed of some of the prosecutions that I see today and certainly embarrassed by the Department of Justice.
Wow. And I know you've done some cases that are close to home in Chester County. In fact, you represented the now Sheriff Dykes in his case.
Yes, I did. I represented Kevin Dykes, who's a lovely man who was terminated by now a judge, and who had become the DA. Mm-hmm. And we resolved that case.
Yeah, and so right there, perfect example. You may be representing the Republican Party, but you're about justice, as you said.
Absolutely.
Okay, so we're going to get down to the crux of this matter, as I said just a couple minutes ago. I want to talk about this because apparently you have been working quite diligently on a lot of questionable decisions that have been made through the county and voter services, correct? Is that a proper way to frame it?
Yes. I had, I guess I should step back a little bit. I came from an immigrant family. Mm-hmm. My dad and my grandparents all were born in Italy. My father was D-Day +2 when he was not a citizen yet.
Mm-hmm. That was a way to get your citizenship.
Actually, it took 5 more years.
Really?
Yes.
Wow.
And they instilled in us a love of this country. They were all Democrats. I think today they would be Republicans, because their values are more akin with the Republican Party. Mm-hmm. So that's the mindset that I bring to this, is that trying to be fair. And I had I'd always been a Republican. I was the rebel in the family, I guess. Though I do remember seeing, that's how old I am, I remember my grandfather taking me to see JFK at Lawrence Park Shopping Center.
Wow. Wow.
And putting me on top of a TV van. At those days, that's how they broadcast. So I could actually see him. I was about 10 years old.
You know, my family's from Massachusetts, and if you're from Massachusetts, you're required to have a crucifix someplace in the house and a picture of JFK. And to this day, my father still has a picture of JFK, a painting. It's a fairly famous painting. I looked it up on eBay. It's worth about $150. My mom bought it at a yard sale for like a quarter. God bless her.
Right.
Depression era parents, you got to love them, right?
Right.
And it's still in his living room to this day. And it's a very good painting. And it's him on the beach. Probably they're in Hyannisport there, you know. But yeah, so I'm a big fan. My family was big fans of JFK.
Yeah, and as we're, as we all were in those days. We didn't have the type of vitriol between the Democrats and the Republicans that exists today, which is very unfortunate. I had always, volunteered to do things for the Republican Party, but as I saw the way to retirement, I thought, well, I'm going to get much more involved. I began by being a committee person. We knocked on doors and asked people to put out signs for Republicans, and they said they were afraid. And that disturbs me greatly. That should disturb every American.
And that's currently, you're saying, in the recent past.
Yeah, I've only been doing this about 2.5 years.
Okay.
And we had a neighbor who's on a busy highway, and she's out front with her toddlers. She had a Trump sign out, and people were throwing rocks and bottles at them and yelling obscenities. Mm-hmm. And this has got to stop. And I think as the solicitor, what we're trying to do, and we have a very good team. We just reelected our chairman, is that what we're trying to do is focus in on issues that we believe have a legitimate legal basis. Mm-hmm. There are a lot of people who file their own lawsuits for recounts. If you're going to do that, you have to have a basis for that.
Got to have some facts.
You have to have some facts, and that's not what we're doing. Mm-hmm. A lot of the cases that have been thrown out of court were never made it past the preliminary objection stage, so there was never an opportunity
to present
evidence.
Okay.
So again, going back at this, looking as a trial lawyer, litigator for many, many years, when I first became solicitor, which was midnight on the November election, I was inundated with people telling me about things that they had encountered, and I was shocked.
If you hadn't left that glass slipper behind, you'd be out of this. You wouldn't have to worry.
Right.
But they found it, put it back on you, and now you're roped in.
I am roped in. So one of the first issues that we encountered when I, first started, that morning, there was an issue about what's called designated agent forms. And
tell me what a designated agent form is, because the listeners aren't going to understand that.
Well, there are certain people who are disabled, and they can't make it to the polls. And this is before we had mail-in ballots for no reason. We always had absentee ballots.
Absentee ballots, you filled it out. You said what your excuse was. I'll be traveling. I'm disabled. That type of thing. Correct. Yeah.
So the designated agent form is if mom and dad are live at home, their child is able to go to mail their ballot,
sure,
or bring their ballot to a drop box or to voter services. They designate the child to do that because they both live together. They can designate one person. Now, the issue then with the ballots that we were looking at, where they all came from nursing home or long-term care facilities.
Okay.
Let's say. And initially, when it was first brought up, the voter services said, "Oh, sure, we'll show you these designated agent forms."
You wanted to look at the forms, examine them to make sure there was no funny business with the applications.
Right. Well, our concern is, ballot harvesting is illegal in Pennsylvania.
Okay. And a ballot harvest would be?
Well, it would be, for instance, vulnerable people in a nursing home, and someone who works there decides, well, I'm going to go and get mail-in ballot applications, have these people fill them out and mail them in. When the ballot comes, then I'll go back to that person, have them fill out the ballot, and designate me as their agent. And that way, I then can get, in this case, it was 13 ballots, put them in the envelopes, and return them to voter services. And that's ballot harvesting. And it's meant to protect the vulnerable person.
Right, because somebody may actually fill out the ballot at the same time, so that limits what it would be. Of course, if somebody's filling out the ballot at the same time, they really don't care about ballot harvesting either.
No, they just want to cheat. So the initial response from voter services was, yes, we'll show you these designated agent forms.
Sure, it's a right to know, it's public, right?
Right. And you don't have to go through the right to know process, which is another process where you have to fill out forms. You can do it online and tell them what you want. And of course, they seem to object to an awful lot of those right to know requests.
Really?
Yeah. And there's litigation going on about that now. So I asked to see them. There was an agreement. And then the next thing we know, we get a lot of complaints on Election Day. A lot of the machines were down. In one particular precinct, they were unable to feed the ballot into the tabulator. So they were putting them aside. And they were telling the voter, well, you can come back later when we get the machine fixed.
Nice.
Yeah. So that was
People
an issue.
don't have anything else to do with their lives, right?
No.
We'll just zip on back over to the polls.
Exactly. And the other issue is, where are those ballots being maintained while the machines are down?
In the box. In the box right there.
Right. And who's there to watch? And this feeds into the poll watchers. So we have people who are supposed to, Republicans usually, and Democrats, who watch at the polls. They sit there all day and they look for issues such as this. So I had brought up to voter services, you need to do something about this one machine that kept breaking. And I had affidavits from 3 or 4 voters saying, in case we had to file something. So they said, oh no, we'll take care of it. So what they do is they take it from the machine that has certain designation, like it's a 250 machine, and then they run those ballots through a machine that's like a 400 or a 500 or a 900. And that's how they do a recount. They claim that they can tell if all of the ballots from the precinct were, in fact, voted and counted, because they can count how many ballots they had, how many were left over, how many were spoiled. So there's no need at the precinct level to, at the end of the night, open the machine, pull out the ballots, and you have poll workers, and they do this in my precinct. They each get piles of 10, 12. They count them out, we have 500 votes.
And it has to match the counter, right?
And
so
it
the
matches,
counters.
right. It matches the count on the machine.
Got it. Why don't you hold that thought? We got to pay some bills here, so we're going to shoot over to a couple commercials, and we'll be right back to follow up on this with Dolores Troiani. And I am back, welcoming back Dolores Troiani, talking about what's going on in the county and voter services. So take it away, Dolores. We ended with
the 2% audit, which is a mandatory audit, and they pick what precincts to audit. But this is so now I've raised two issues, designated agents and the tabulators. And the state then decided that they were going to designate Chester County for a risk-limited audit. And what that means is they actually do a hand count.
Okay.
And it's kind of a complex process of how they pick the precincts that are going to be hand counted. It's for one statewide office. And we get a letter or email from Voter Services. We want to make this bipartisan because the state said it should be. So name 5 Republicans who will participate in the hand count, which I do.
Makes perfect sense. Good. So it's balanced out, 5 Democrats, 5 Republicans.
And a Voter Services person.
Perfect.
And there's 5 tables. The Voter Services person controls the ballots. They're handed to the Democrat, they're handed to the Republican, and then somebody writes down, this is a vote for that person.
Mm-hmm.
And at the end, they should tabulate and be correct. So we show up for the risk-limited audit, and they tell us that 3 of the people that I designated were disqualified because they had signed a petition for a county-wide recount petition.
And that's a problem. Why? Why can't they sign a petition?
I don't understand why that would be a problem. They have a constitutional right to challenge anybody they want. And we had a go around about that. They delayed over an hour. They said that as lawyers, they might have to give instruction to a plaintiff, of course, not about the case that the plaintiff was in. And so I said, okay, who are you auditing? What are your instructions? And they wouldn't tell me. They refused to sit, after over an hour, they refused to sit our 3 people. They substituted Voter Services individuals who they said were bipartisan. I said, fine, what are their names? They would only give me the first name.
Maybe one was like Cher,
yeah.
And that's all they have is first names.
I don't think so.
Why not a last name? I mean, this is a public observation, correct? I mean, this is a public thing.
Well, I think this is a pattern that we're beginning to see.
Mm-hmm.
So they told me I'd go on their website and use the first name to figure out who worked for Voter Services and who might be there.
So it's a process of elimination to find out how many mics there are.
I guess so.
That's fantastic.
And they wouldn't tell me if they were Republicans or another or independent or libertarian or whatever. And the instruction turned out to be how to make the count. You're the person who's going to say, okay, 1 vote for so-and-so, and then the other person writes down 1 vote for so-and-so. I don't see how that is any legal issue.
Right. That's typical, just normal instruction.
Just a normal instruction. So we have these weekly meetings now, or I'm sorry, monthly meetings.
We being?
It's supposed to be the party chairman or party designee, the solicitors.
Mm-hmm. So both Democrat and Republican.
And Libertarian.
And Libertarians, fantastic. Mm-hmm. And they sit down with Voter Services.
Voter Services, 3 or 4 people from Voter Services, and at least 2 of the county solicitors.
Got it.
And as it turns out, I have one question, which apparently they think is one question too many. And my question was, what is your legal authority for doing what you do? So they would not show us then the designated agent forms. But they did tell us where the votes came from. Now, there are systems in place that I think under a right to know, you can get this documentation, but certainly all the parties have the ability to go onto what is called a SURE system, and that is a state-run database. Mm-hmm. We were able to figure out who the 13 people were who voted from the nursing home, the assisted living home. long-term care facility. And we were able to determine that there was only one designated agent. And that is a violation of the Department of State directives that say, specifically, a long-term care facility is not a household.
Mm-hmm.
And that's to prevent ballot harvesting.
And even if it was a household, they're allowed to carry how many?
Well, if you live together, as I said, you could be, aunt, uncle, parents,
Right.
whatever.
So
you
you
could
could carry.
dessigate one person as long as you're living in the same
so they can
household.
carry 6 ballots then from the household? Okay,
But you have to have the form. You have to wrap when you drop these ballots off, you have to have a designated agent form with each ballot that you are mailing in.
Got it.
So, again, I said, what is your authority for doing this? And I actually brought this up at a Board of Elections meeting.
An authority would be a rule, a law that has been passed that says that this is what they're authorized to do. Right. This is how it works. This is the process.
The issue is that voter services is only allowed to make rules and regulations that don't conflict and are not inconsistent with the law.
Sure.
Which is why they tell you their answer to everything is, it's the law, it's the law. But then when you say what law, then there's some issues at that point. The Department of State runs the elections for Pennsylvania. They're supposed to be uniform. Mm-hmm. They issue directives. Somewhere, some judge said, well, you don't really have to follow the directives. You can have elections that are not uniform. So you can go to a different county and they're going to run their elections differently than Chester County.
I can actually tell you, interrupt real quick. Years ago, I saw something I didn't like, and I questioned voter services about it. Voter services said, that's the law. That's the way it is. Well, it wasn't. I called up to the Department of State, and they said, well, that's a county decision. It was like some kind of gooey, gray, mushy, you go ahead and handle it. They just handle it. I said, but it's not the law. And they said, look, the county handles that, and they decide whether they're going to enforce this or not, which I find very bizarre.
Well, and that's part of what we're trying to do. We filed a lawsuit trying to force the county to obey the Sunshine Act, one, and to provide the uniformity that they're supposed to provide.
And the Sunshine Act, if you could define what that is for the listeners.
Well, being new to all of this and, frankly, never going to many of these public meetings, I started going to the commissioners meeting and the Board of Elections meeting, and I brought all these issues up because I think these issues are easily resolved.
Sure.
I'm a taxpayer here, too. You shouldn't have to hire a lawyer to bring this up, and the county should not be hiring lawyers at who knows what expense to fight over something that, to me, is pretty obvious. Mm-hmm. So the Sunshine Act requires the commissioners, the board, the administrators, whoever is, making these rules, supervisors, to act in public. And that's why you have this idea of people coming in to make public comment. And the idea is that the deliberations are open to the public, which they are not here. The discussions are open to the public. They claim they're privileged. And you get some feedback. So what's happening is people go to these meetings, and 9 times out of 10, it's the same person. And they'll say, I have a problem with what you have done here. And I have evidence, for instance, that there's 2,700 people in your voter rolls who no longer live here.
Okay.
Now, that's something that is of concern to all of us. The response from the commissioners is, well, I'll get back to you, that individual.
Why not the public?
That's the problem. Then they go and they have an executive meeting with their solicitor and claim that now that's a privileged meeting because, and this is what the court calls a subterfuge, you continually hide what you're doing by having your attorney sit there and then claiming it's attorney-client privileged. So what happened with the designated agent forms is the county insisted, they found a case in a footnote, and again, when I went to law school, footnotes were not holdings of the court. The footnote says that the county can designate a long-term care facility as a household as an administrative proceeding.
Oh, well, there you go.
It's a footnote. Now, this footnote was way before we had mail-in ballots.
Yep.
Okay. So I said to Voter Services, show me where they did that. Where did the Board of Elections designate a long-term care facility to be a household?
So they would have passed a law, an ordinance, a resolution to make that happen.
Probably a
and
resolution.
And then follow that, because now the Board of Elections, which is also the commissioners, they would have decided that and gone from there. Okay.
Right.
Now the policy.
So now I go back to previous commissioners. Did you do this when you were commissioner? No. Can't find it. Brought it up at a public meeting. And basically, fortunately, at that meeting, there were a lot of people there who were actually, as I said, yelling, let her talk. So I think they got a little concerned, which is another reason why more people should come to these meetings. And they actually told the solicitor to let me see these documents. But that didn't resolve the issue. I kept insisting, where did you designate them as a long-term care facility, as a household? Where's the writing? And they said there isn't any. So that's part of our lawsuit.
So they have a policy that they just made up on the fly, basically, and they're following that. So that's you have your executive law, which executive, like the governor writes it in. You have your legislative law, right, which is done through the legislation, Congress, and then you have administrative law. And this is really no law. This is just, we just decided.
We just decided.
This is just a rule that we've decided to make.
And you didn't do it in person. You didn't do it in public. Where did this law come from?
And it's just an ether. It's just out there floating. Okay.
Right.
So it doesn't exist. The answer is it doesn't exist.
So we then saw the designated agent forms. And as we saw, there was one person who represented these 13 or so people. We put that in part of our lawsuit, but you have to understand, when they answer this, and they hired these high-priced lawyers, I assume high-priced lawyers.
By the way, the person that was doing this, they live at the facility.
Well, that's the other issue. I don't know that person lives at the facility. I think that person worked at the facility, but we're not challenging that election. And that's how they divert your attention. They say, oh, look at those stupid Republicans. They're challenging an election. There's 13 votes. It doesn't make a difference. No. We're challenging the process.
Do you care how they voted? Do you care if they voted Republican,
No, I don't
Democrat,
care.
Communist?
I don't care how they voted at all.
Okay.
And, we never even checked. Are they Republicans? Are they Democrats? I don't care.
Right. Okay.
But this is a dry run for what's coming in November. And November we need to resolve some of these issues. It should be easily resolved. Put it on your agenda, have public comments on it, tell us why you're doing it. And if you still want to do it, make a resolution and suffer the consequences. And that's the problem. They do not want to be criticized by the public. At the certification, which happened, I believe, on May 14th, all of those meetings are videotaped. And I would urge everyone to go back and look at that tape. Look at what our chairman said, Rafi Terzian, and look at the reaction from the commissioners.
Right.
And see if you agree with the way they acted towards this. We're not asking for the moon. We're not making false claims. We're just saying, you have an issue. Let's work together to resolve it.
Got it. And with that, we're going to take a break, pay for some of this airtime, and we're going to go to our advertisers. See you in 2 minutes.
Oh, it's good to be back.
And it's good to be back here with Dolores Troiani. Dolores is talking about the trials and tribulations of Chester County Election Board and Voter Services, and how cooperative they've been, if you can detect the sarcasm there, Dolores. So continue on talking about what's going on with no laws, just rules being made that are not being done out in the public. People don't know what's happening.
Well, one of the other things that happened is that in one of our meetings, and the very first one I was at, they said they were realigning the precincts in Phoenixville. And they had filed a petition with the court.
And that's because of population, so they're trying to move them around. What's the reasoning for that?
I really don't know why. I think that's part of the excuse. I don't know whether that's legitimate because we haven't really looked into that. But it was
perhaps junior gerrymandering. We don't know.
Right. But it was done by Phoenixville Borough Council.
Okay.
And in order for it to be authorized, it has to go to the court. And there has to be certain notifications given. So when I heard that they had filed this petition, I said, well, what are you doing? Wait, the Republicans are running as committee people in this election. The Democrats are not. They have a 4-year term. We have a 2-year term. This is the time period where we have to go get signatures to run for election.
And that precinct may not even be where the people are going to win.
Exactly. Or live.
Or live, right. So now all of a sudden they're running for a position that doesn't exist anymore because of their location.
So they said, oh, well, get petitions in both precincts. I said, well, what are the precincts? Well, you can find out from the borough council. So I said, well, give me your petition. So after the third request, then I wrote an email saying, if you're not giving me the petition, it's like 7 days later, tell me why you're not giving it to me. And they said, oh, we've just been busy, and here it is. So
time's ticking. You got to fill out petitions. You have 3 weeks, right, to fill out petitions.
Right.
And now a week is already gone. So now you're down to 14 days from 21 to collect all the signatures.
But, and I think this is the effectiveness of having people complain consistently, maybe persistently also. They say, okay, you know what, we won't do it for this election. We'll do it for after the November election. Okay. I said, fine, but I want to see your petition because there's no way of me knowing what they filed without knowing the docket number.
And this is the petition that goes to the courts and the judge signs off on it, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
They eliminated in the petition the notice requirements.
And the notice would have been to the Republican Party
well,
for
the notice is to public.
Okay, to public, okay.
It's got to be advertised, and they didn't do any of this. Who needs that, right? And they cited that part of the law, but they eliminated the sentences about the notifications. So at our next meeting,
a friend of mine says it's important that you use all the words, not just the words you like.
That's right. They only use the words they like. So I said, okay, you need to withdraw this. Well, then I find out that the judge actually signed the order. And they said, well, it doesn't matter because it's, it really, we know it's not an invalid order. So what are you talking about? You have to vacate it because you have only 20 days or 30 days to vacate an order.
Right. Otherwise, it's now
the law.
It's now decided and it's the law. Okay.
So they wouldn't give it to me. I had to go buy it. I had to spend 50 cents to go buy the order at the Prothonotary's office.
Did you get reimbursed on that?
No, I didn't. They've upped my salary, but I found out that 2 times 0 is 0. Yeah, I got a raise.
Nice.
So I filed a motion to vacate. Let them know I was doing it, and they vacated it before. They vacated it on a Friday. I filed it on a Monday. But they also were talking about doing this countywide. So
resetting the precincts.
Resetting the precincts because some of them are too large. And the law, which needs to be changed, says that, the precinct shouldn't be bigger than 1,200 voters. I mean, that's hasn't happened in years.
Right.
Yeah. So I said, okay, tell me that whenever you file something else about realignment, you'll let me know. No.
What?
No. Now, this is in my lawsuit. You've hired a lawyer, and I'll bet that Philadelphia firm is charging this county $1,000 an hour.
Right.
Because now they have 2 lawyers. You can't have just one.
Yeah.
And you're fighting that? What's the harm to you?
Right. What difference does it make if a notice is going out? Wouldn't you want to make sure everybody knows so everything gets done the proper way?
Right. Well, they said, well, we're going to follow the law. Well, I know it's not in the law for you to notify the party, but hey, who else is going to object? How are we supposed to find out? Because you can't find it on the internet, and we don't have, as you said, newspapers covering this or looking at the dockets and letting us know what's happening.
So unless you're constantly knocking on the door, sending a note or calling in or whatever, you're never going to find out.
And, if this is what they want, I'm happy to send them an email a day saying, did you file anything today?
Oh, my God. I can't even imagine.
But, that's just silly. Come on.
So
be adults.
So you were able to push that back. So that was actually safe. And that shouldn't be done in a committee year, right?
No.
Whether it's Democrats or Republicans, you shouldn't be having a redistricting in a year where committee people are doing that. And by the way, committee people, I have to explain this to the listening audience. Committee people are the people that work for the party, whether it be Democrat, Republican, whatever, Libertarian. What they do is they're the ones that you see at the polls. They talk to you. They're the ones that do the campaigning, the door to door. They're the functionary people that are the worker bees of the committee. That's of the county committee, and that's how the jobs get done for the parties. That's how you get your message out on both sides. So they have to be elected in as party positions. So that's why you see them on the ballot in the primary. So when they run, you'll see these committee people go, I don't know who they are. They're people running for it. Lots of times they're not contested because, I need brain surgery to frontal lobotomies to want to run for committee. That's why I'm not one. And
Thank you. I'm not insulted.
And hey, listen, college, best 3 days of my life. So they run, and then midnight, unless there's some kind of weird challenge or something, they become the committee people, and those are the worker bees for both sides. And so you can't be changing precincts, moving, lines around to different streets for these people that are trying to run for these positions. And this is a non-governmental job. I need to specify that. This is a non-governmental job. This is a party job. So it is not paid for by the government. It is merely part of working for the party. So
they're all volunteers.
All volunteers. They make $0, 0 cents. Much like my grade average, 0.00.
I don't believe it. So, and one of the functions of a committee person is to be a poll watcher. And like I said in the beginning, we have people who sit inside all day long, and they view what's happening. And if there's an issue, they'll come out and tell the solicitors. We have a solicitors group. They'll call back to headquarters, and they'll try to get help or at least make some documentation that there's an issue. Well, lo and behold, in this election, now forever, I don't know anybody who says that it didn't happen. I know I've been a committee person now, I guess, 3 years. And when I ran twice, I got a poll watcher certificate.
Sure, they all do, right?
They all do. Okay. Well, this time they said, you can't be a poll watcher in your own precinct because you're a candidate. And if you are a poll watcher, you're going to go in there and you're going to electioneer. Now, there is case law that says you can't make that assumption, but they don't apply it to this case. And as you said, I think we had maybe 6 contested elections. Nobody even knows who you are. You can't wear your badge. You just sit in the room there. You're in a corner, and they probably don't even see you.
Now, look, this is where I'm going to play devil's advocate with you, okay, Dolores? So I go in there, and I do electioneer, okay? Let's say they're right. I go in there, and I electioneer, okay? I'm just going to get away with that, right?
No, there's what we call judges of elections, some of whom are Republicans, a lot of whom are Democrats, and they will kick you out. And if you don't leave voluntarily, the constable will come and remove you physically.
Okay, so there's already a stopgap for that. That's already going to happen. You walk in there, you start saying, vote for me. I'm your best choice. And they're like, hey, you out, gone, bye-bye. Right. And it's going to be a problem.
But, we're standing outside doing that.
Sure, right. Why would you do it inside when you can have conversations outside without challenge?
Right.
Okay, so that doesn't make any sense to me.
And we filed a petition about that, for an emergency petition, and that was denied. But that is still, still have a viable lawsuit concerning that
so that
issue.
Continues on.
Yes. These issues that I'm talking about all continue on.
So these people are basically having their rights taken away to actually observe the elections. They're in a lot of cases, these guys are probably unchallenged, and they say, well, I'm going to go in and watch the election because I know I'm going to get voted in as committee person.
But, and if there are Democrats listening out there, ask your party why they're not objecting to this, because allegedly it's going to happen to them in 2 years when they run.
Right.
None of us are going to be allowed to be in there.
None of us are going to be allowed to be in there. That's stupid.
Right.
That's just stupid because we want free and fair elections.
Exactly.
We want things to be run properly. We don't want to see people, oh, that ballot doesn't work. I'll just stick it over here in this box where everybody can see it until the machines back up.
Now, and I think that we have effectuated some change to give them their due. For instance, we had an issue with what's called spoiled ballots.
Okay.
And what that is somebody gets a mail-in ballot, they don't vote it, they bring it into the precinct to vote in person. The judge of elections take custody of that ballot and the envelope and all the things that accompany it, and they're supposed to put it write spoiled on it and put it somewhere. And at the end of the night, that's how we know that one was returned and it was not counted.
Right, so it's not double voting.
No. So they've decided that they're going to do something like give the judge of elections like a punch hole thing. And they're going to be able to punch hole that spoiled ballot so it cannot be counted.
That's what they do with your driver's license when
Right.
you get the new license.
When you get the new license.
Stamp it, yeah, they pop it. Well, it's a lot of times out-of-state people or whatever, yeah. When it's a replacement license, they punch the old one.
So, I mean, there are things that they could do, and we are trying to work with them, but they don't seem to be willing to work with us. And you know, call me paranoid, but, you know, changing the rules about poll watchers seemed to me to be retaliation and not letting our people participate in the risk-limited audit.
Well, now, I think it goes further than that with a story I heard recently, and I want you to confirm or deny it. But first, we're going to go get these bills paid, and we'll be back with more with Dolores Troiani in just a second.
Oh, it's good to be back.
And we are back for the final segment with Dolores Troiani talking about Chester County Election Board and voter services and some interesting issues and trials and tribulations here. So let's get into this final quarter, Dolores.
Okay. So the other interesting thing that happened is, you remember former Sheriff Bunny Welsh was running to be a delegate to the National Convention.
Yes.
And so was Marian Moskowitz.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, she was running for the Democrats, and Bunny was running for the Republicans.
Right.
Bunny was denied a poll watcher certificate because,
Oh.
after all, she might electioneer.
Oh, right, because it's in your area, and so, yeah, and hers is countywide, right?
Hers is countywide. She couldn't do it anywhere.
Okay.
Okay.
So both of those are not allowed to then run.
Right. However, so we then filed a petition.
So it does affect the Democrats in that way.
No, it doesn't, because Marian Moskowitz was running for the same position, and she was allowed to certify her own election.
Wait.
A candidate is a candidate. You told me that. So what are you talking about?
So how does that work? What happened?
Well, they scheduled the certification for the same time as the petition was being heard. And, you know, by the time we got the petition, I left for the petition. I went back and they had already certified the election. So I sent an email to the judge saying, well, thank you, it's moot. You know.
Yeah. So she's
She
running,
certified her own election.
So she certified her own election, yet is not supposed to be doing anything like that because that'd be electioneering, right? So can't be.
Well, it's because they told us, and you know, the reason that your people can't be poll watchers is because they're candidates.
Right.
Well, she's a candidate, and what happens is, you know, in the last election, the commissioners two of the commissioners were running, so they appointed two judges to be on the board of elections.
To keep that fair and square, that's a thing. So there'd be no electioneering, there'd be no funny business in there.
Well, it's also the appearance of impropriety, and it's hubris. I'm sorry.
Right.
You know, these people think that they can make up their own laws, they're above the law, and they are the people who are doing damage to our republic, because this is supposed to be a democracy, a republic.
Mm-hmm.
And people need to know with certainty that the rules apply to everyone.
Mm-hmm.
And it doesn't matter whether you're a Democrat or a Republican.
Right. So it can't be biased, otherwise it becomes hypocritical. And this I think is what everybody's really frustrated with is the hypocrisy, right? Things happen and it's the laws are for thee and not for me, right? So you have this situation where I guess Bunny was, since she's running for election and now she can't do that, but Marian Moskowitz, how did they rationalize that? I mean, it's the same thing. What do they say on that?
Well, they said that she was allowed because she was a civil servant or a civil candidate. I said, well, no, she's a party candidate.
Right, that's a party candidate.
Right. So
as a delegate, it has nothing to do with governmental services.
Right. And I brought it under one specific statute that says that they can't do that. And then they came up with some other issues which they said were, you had to file a different type of lawsuit. But I said, I'm not doing that lawsuit. So what they do is they take what you say and make it to the extreme.
Mm-hmm. They stretch it until it fits what they need it.
To what they need it.
Uh-huh. So in a situation like this, where they're allowing it the one way and not the other, now this, I think, as we're talking about this, but this wasn't even a law. This was never done. This was never ruled on. This was never decided in public. This was never a resolution in the beginning, anyway, that committee people, candidates couldn't be poll watchers or anything like that anyway, right?
Well, it had been done for years, for decades. And
Right.
suddenly now we have these different people who are making this up as they go along.
Because I was going to say that for all the times I've ever seen these, the committee people, they've been poll watchers, and this has never been a challenge of any type.
No.
And there is to this day, they have never handed you anything in writing that says that this was passed by the commissioners or the election board.
No, it was not passed but when I got my poll watcher certificate, it said that I could not be a poll watcher in Schuylkill 4. So what were we supposed to do? Run all over the county and try to rearrange everybody, and that would be a massive undertaking,
Right.
and it made no sense.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But more importantly, why did they do that? What are they doing on the primary that they're going to do in November? And then they say, "Oh, you stupid Republicans, why are you so suspicious of us?" Well,
I guess there is a problem with that, and I'll tell you, it's really funny because when you talk about this again, I don't care what party it is that's doing it. I need to be very specific on that. I don't want to see either side to have an imbalance. Everybody has to be able to have it. If that's what the law is, that's what the law is. But it has to be equal for both sides on this type of thing. And a lot of people would think, well, what's the big deal? So they can't be poll watchers. Well, where's it end? What's the next thing that happens? And if this was not adopted and done by the election board, i.e. the commissioners, was it written somehow? Who came up with the policy then? Was it a policy of voter services? Where'd it come from? It just doesn't drop out of the sky. Somebody somewhere decided this was going to happen, and we don't have an answer to that. I mean, it doesn't seem like that, right?
No, we don't know why it happened.
It just happened.
But there is a value of having people be in the polls. I mean, the other thing that poll watchers do is they do what's called a strike list, and this is why I didn't understand why the Democrats, unless they are positive it's not going to happen to them when they run, why they weren't joining in on this.
Mm-hmm.
And as the voter comes in, the poll worker calls out your name, and the poll watcher then strikes off that name. And at a certain time during the day, we start calling people and saying, you didn't do a mail-in ballot. You said you were going to vote in person. Are you coming in to
Time's
vote?
ticking.
Time's ticking.
Yes. Yeah. Actually, the Democrats are very good at the strike list. I've watched them for years. They are remarkable. I mean, they do a phenomenal job at that. They get them out. They have phone banks. They call up. They say, hey, you got to get in here. You got to get this done. They have done a tremendous job. I absolutely admire them for how well they've worked that system. And when I say worked it, I don't mean it in a derogatory term. I mean, I admire those guys for that. They've done a phenomenal job. The Republicans, not so much. Yeah, it hasn't been as good.
No, it hasn't.
But without being able to be in there, you can't run a strike list. And a strike list is critical to the elections for people to, and I got to tell you, people always go, oh my God, I forgot it's election day. I can't tell you how many people I know that just forgot it's election day. Right. And you make that phone call, and then later on they're there. And it gets done. So it's an important process, part of the election process, and it is campaigning, right? It is to be able to do that. They're not campaigning inside of there. They're merely taking the names. By the way, most people don't realize it. They get very upset when they go, they yelled my name when I walked in there to get my ballot. And I went, well, it's a public place. It's a public notice. You're here and getting a ballot to vote for somebody. People seem to be more afraid these days that anybody knows that they voted or their belief system, but right. for the fear that they'll be shouted down. And I've seen this grow and canceled. It's unbelievable. The things I've seen, the doxing I have seen in the recent past, in the last 6, 8, 10 years, has become huge. And with the internet, it's made it so much easier for people to do things, and they find things and, put things out about people. And look, everybody has their right to their opinion. To be shut down like that, what they do is it's done by fear when people do those things, and you shut them down. And then when they don't make an opinion, then the people say, well, nobody argued with it. Certainly they agree with us. They agree it through capitulation. They gave up and walked away and said, I'm done. I'm going to go vote, and that's it. They don't want to talk to anybody. They don't want to say anything. And as a result, there's less communication, and communication's power. People need to know what's happening.
Or else they don't vote.
Right? And then they complain, and I have people all the time that go, I'm done voting. And I go, well, then when things go bad, it's your fault because you hold X dear to your heart, yet you say nothing's ever going to change. Well, it's never going to change. You've just created a self-fulfilling prophecy, right?
Exactly.
It becomes frightening. It really does. And so I admire what you're doing by standing up and fighting this for policy, not only for the Republicans, but in essence, actually the Democrats. They don't even realize that what you're doing, because it's about fairness and making sure everybody's treated equally here. And that even goes for the people in the assisted living facilities, making sure that they're not being taken advantage of, right? Because we don't know what goes on there. By the way, you were talking about ballot harvesting. There was people that did a right to know for the camera the first time around with the mail-in ballots. And I got a hold of that video and watched it. And right in front of the GSC, the Government Services Building, they had a box there. And there were a huge amount of people bringing in more than one ballot. There was one person, they blanked out the faces for privacy. There was one person that actually had a emergency management services embroidered shirt on, worked right in that building, was dropping like 5 or 6 ballots in the box. They didn't have things wrapped around. They were just ballots. They were just dumping them in. There's a warning right there that says you can do your ballot, unless you have this form. Nobody ever challenged them. Nothing ever came of it. This is a problem for everybody because that is ballot harvesting, and it doesn't take a lot to move things either way in this world. It's the yin and yang of the universe. Now, we've pretty much come to the end of the show. I have to thank you, Dolores, for coming on and talking about this. It is confusing in some ways. You have to listen to exactly what Dolores said. There's a lot of twists to this thing, but the bottom line is the rules need to be followed, and the rules have to be proven that they're rules. I think that's the most important thing. So with that, I'm going to thank Eric for being here, being the guy that ran my board today. Of course, Sam, the intern, wherever he is. I think he's hiding under a desk someplace, but God loves Sam. He's the best. And of course, Donna Saul, the manager of the station that has given me the opportunity to bring this news to you. And by the way, if you don't like my show, don't watch it. But if you do, send an email to the station and tell them how much you liked it. I'm Barry Dee, and I'll see you next week for All Politics Are Local.